to the beat, y'all. That beat, y'all.
What's going on, beautiful people? Happy Thursday to everyone. And thank you for joining in to another live broadcast of Beats Per Minute podcast, where hip hop, health, and matters of the heart are always in sync. I am your girl, Miss Thursday, and I have once again my lovely co host, Miss Tayrn, with me. What's going on,
Hi.
Tayrn? So, this should be an interesting show, to say the
Yes.
least. So, to get started, let me just say this. I want to give a disclaimer. Uh, Tonight, we are going to be talking about the whirlwind, the heart wrenching, I can't even describe it, but the Kirk Franklin documentary, Father's Day. If you have not seen it, you really need to look. Stay here though, and we won't give everything away, but it definitely is going to be some lot of information, a lot of information. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Tayrn now to get everything started. But before I do want to ask you, Tayrn, to start out with your thoughts on the documentary.
Well, okay. So let me just say this. I'll start from the beginning. Because
Okay.
remember, all right, I think it was what? The week before it came out, right?
Mhm.
And you text me and you was just like, hey, what's going on with your boy?
Mhm.
Hey, what's up with your boy? And I'm like, oh Lord, let me check. So I go on Instagram and I'm checking. And
Mhm.
from the little bit of information I had, I was just like, it sounds to me like he found his father, right?
Mhm.
Everybody wasn't too sure. Everybody saw the picture, and it was just like, he got a baby on the way, or
Mhm.
something like that. And me, no. Context clues. Context clues.
Context clues. Okay.
Yes. So I was just like, I think he found his father.
Mhm.
I was correct. The documentary dropped on that Friday, and I watched enough to where I could confirm that I was right. That's all at the time, that's all I cared about was being right. So I
Mhm.
texted you and I was just like, it was what I thought. He
Mhm.
found his dad. So then you watched it.
Mhm.
And I was just like, this is this is going there. This is there.
Mhm.
So then yesterday I watched
Mhm.
the whole thing. And I had a moment where I was just like, this is sad as hell. This is sad. This is very sad because I'm like, I can't imagine like what that feels like because I've never had to deal with like kind of like not knowing who my biological parents were. Like I don't know that feeling
Mhm.
of like not knowing where I come from. Well, mm,
You know where you're coming from. You know where you came from in a lot of
I
ways. You know
well,
enough.
yeah, kind of. Like I know who my parents are and I know who my parents' siblings are, but it is like it's very weird when it's just like me as the child is like discovering like what y'all have going on. that could be a lot. So yeah, and I texted you and I told you I was just like, okay, I want to talk about this because I don't know. I think like just kind of seeing it and analyzing that, it seemed relatable
Mm-hmm.
just because I've kind of seen both of y'all go through something like that. Like both of my parents try to like figure out who they are as people, and so I'm like, I can see how this conversation could be beneficial.
Well, as you guys enter into the podcast, please, let us know that you're here. Make sure you comment, engage with us. This is definitely going to be a conversation between everyone, that joins in. And just to give a little bit more clarity to what we're discussing, again, we are talking about the documentary that Kirk Franklin dropped on Friday on his YouTube channel entitled Father's Day. What started out as a behind the scenes of him working on a new album became a journey of discovery, of finding out that the man that he thought was his father, that he buried, believing was his father, he then found out was not, and actually found out who his biological father was. The documentary takes you through um, him going through the process of finding out in just a very small conversation at another funeral. This gentleman would make the announcement that, he, at one point had a relationship
Dated.
with
Hmm.
Kirk's biological mother. Um, without giving it all away, I think that the thing that for me was seeing all the different characters and the different moving parts and being able to feel very deeply and very bad for everyone involved. As much as my heart goes out to Kirk, because I think that, what I'm very grateful seeing is one, that people have appreciated him being so transparent and sharing his story, and so many people being able to identify with him. I also think it shows that no matter what kind of level of success you can find in the world or achieve in this world, or any kind of money you have, that at the very um, foundation and core of us all, we want to belong to someone. We want to belong to and know where we come from. We want to feel secure and know that somebody in this world loved us enough to be our parents and take care of us, and all the things that come with having a family. And I think that you find yourself feeling some type of way in regards to everyone's situation in the story. His mother, it's a. I would love to know more of her story, because, of course, we only know his side and the struggles that he battled. But what could it have been like for this 15-year-old girl who gets pregnant and then decides to give her child up for adoption, and she's still around that child but not in that child's life? What could that have been like for her? um, Kirk's bio father, finding out at this point in his life, all these years have passed, that this son um, that he now has is someone he has seen, you know, break, you know, records and win awards, and you know, and is known in his hometown as this, you know, big gospel singer. And it's just so funny because, of course, hindsight's 2020, and it's easy from the outside looking in, but I couldn't help but see the resemblance immediately
Man,
when you
um,
see, you know what I mean? And it's like,
you want to
no
talk about
way,
somebody is the pappy? I'm
yeah,
like,
body in you, you know, nothing in you must have like even allowed yourself to like maybe think like, wait, could he be, you know? And when you don't really know the characters behind the scene, because you've only actually heard of, you know, more so his adopted mom more than you've heard his real mom's name. But I also think about the idea that, you know, once Kirk put his story out originally, how many people looking for a come up came forward to say, I'm the pappy. You know what I mean? Like, even though they knew they wasn't. And what that must have still felt like, because, you know, I don't care how old you are, and where you go, you saw with each one of those three people involved that at whatever age they are, their heartbreak was right where they were dropped, right where they were, you know, at their worst. You saw
like
his
I
mother go
said,
back to that 15-year-old girl. You saw Kirk go back to that little hurt, you know, little boy that, you know, like that moment when he was like, my mom lied to me again. It's like, you know, that was like already heart wrenching before it even got deep into the story. And then even watching his father realizing like all the years he lost because he just didn't know, you know. But
and here's the thing. I'm thinking, still, I felt so bad because I'm like, bro, it felt like when he had pulled up to that house, I'm like, this is some like Fresh Prince of Bel Air type stuff. Like Pops is not doing bad for himself.
they're
And
not doing that at all.
I'm like Kurt out here, you know, just poor. Literally, like all these years, like there is somebody out there that like is doing well for themselves, right? And like you are in these like destitute situations and like barely have enough food to eat and this, that, and the other. And like your father is like in the same city. Like that would like after he found out, like that would run through my mind. Like all this time, it's just like I have struggled and I've gone without and I've had to experience all of these things. And it's just like just to know that this is somebody that wasn't too far from you. Like you said, the guy lived in like the house that he lived in. His son used to play basketball in front of like it's so crazy in the part where he was just like talking about like it wasn't even a rumor. Like his when his biological father was just like it wasn't even a rumor, like he doesn't remember rumors going around. And I'm just like, that's crazy to me, especially because I've lived in a small town. Like no rumors.
Well,
That's
first of all,
crazy.
you know, they weren't in a small town. You know, they were in a smaller community, but at the end of the day, you know, they were in you know, but we also have to remember how that kind of works sometimes, right? Where, you know, depending on, you know, the size of the girl at that time, you know, sometimes some people literally have gone all the way up to delivery without anybody even knowing that they were pregnant. You know, some people will hide, you know, the girls away until they gave birth, and then bring them back, So we've never gotten that full story of how that really played out. And we may never get it unless Kirk mom sits down and she tells her story. And I truly hope she does, because I think that there's so much pain there, that, I do think that her story deserves to be told the only way that she can tell it. Kirk can only tell it from the child that felt abandoned. Um,
Yeah.
his father can only tell it from the man who did not know that he had impregnated this young girl. But only, she can tell it, and
Yeah.
only she can explain even why she didn't even want to accept the results. What that was, what that showed up like in her body, we won't know unless she says. But I could, like I said, only imagine that, it is, we're asking, this woman who has to be now like close to 70s, because if, Kirk is in his 50s and she's only 15 years older, that even in that moment she's still showing up and responding as that 15-year-old girl.
I told you that I think a lot of people, what it read as is just like, oh, she's trying to prevent him from knowing the truth, or she's just not accepting the truth. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, when somebody, like, when somebody thinks the truth is something, that's what they're holding on to. Like, if in her mind, maybe it was never a possibility that anybody else could have been his father.
Well, I thought about that too, but the only issue I had with that is the idea, if she actually really, really, truly knew, then why was there ever the ability for other people to try to come forward and say that they were, his father?
Because he said, this is from Kirk's mouth. He said he was the one that was talking about his adoption story. So at
Mm-hmm.
the time, the man that he thought, the man that died, that he thought was his father, he's not saying that he knows this man. Like, he's not saying that. So if you're only seeing that, like, I'm adopted and I know who my mom is, but I don't know who my father is, of course, people, even if he came forward about, oh, I have found my father, people still gonna try it. Like, and like I said, to me, it didn't read as somebody who is like trying to prevent somebody from knowing the truth. To me, it seemed like, to her, that was her truth. That it was not even possible that
Mm-hmm.
somebody else could have been this boy's father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now it's like, now this is the first time you are seeing your son in what, 23 years, according to what the
Mm-hmm.
little caption was saying. And it's not a situation where like y'all are reconciled. No, he's trying to figure out it, because in his mind you lied to him. So he's coming into the situation with this idea that you have lied to him again. You have let him down again. You have hurt him again. So it's not even a situation where one wouldn't be like, it was, man, that pain was palpable
Yes.
from the conversation. I'm just like, the distance that is between them, that distance played out in the scene where he's trying to talk to, you know, his mom and his aunt. I'm like, bro, they were on literally the opposite ends of the couch. Like, I'm like, um if that's Russia, they are like, he in Antarctica. The way they was spaced out on that couch. And I was uncomfortable because I'm like, that's like, that distance, y'all are doing that in real life. Like, that is something that y'all are actually feel it. Like this is not something just for the scene. You
Yeah.
can feel that distance
No, I
between
mean, you could even see that there's a disconnect there, even when he, originally called his aunt, you know, and it's like, the way she came off. And it's like, you don't even know what this man is dealing with in this moment and why he's calling, and you trying to check him. You know what I mean? And it was just like,
okay, but
it was interesting to see the change of her response and stepping in that moment
hmm
with her sister to say, you know, your son just needs to know. And
hmm
I just also thought it was very interesting because, of course, I'm not no expert on, adopted families and
hmm
that dynamic or anything like that. But, it was very clear that Kirk still, calls her mom. He calls her sister his aunt. He doesn't like dismiss her as by calling her by her name or
who we
anything
talking
like,
about?
huh?
Deborah. We talking about Deborah.
Yeah. I mean, when he's talking about her, he may say it, but when he's talking to her or whatever, it was just very interesting because sometimes when you see that dynamic where maybe a child was raised by their grandmom or an aunt or a cousin or a friend or somebody that was other than their parent, they will now call the parent like by their first name because they don't really consider them to kind of deserve like that type of reverence. And even just him being open and honest enough to say in that moment when his dad realized the truth and that that he was the son, and he's like, I want to hug you, but it may not be
hmm
what it should be. In that moment, it's like, you just saw two men who are doing their best to still show up kind of for each other in that moment, but they're
Well,
still very broken.
one thing I will say is I noticed. I think they said Rick is like, well, his dad is an addiction counselor,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, you can tell that like he has some type of like training or idea of like the mental health space,
Mm-hmm.
just because I'm like, it's very interesting that when he talks, like when he talks about it, he was saying how like you're the most important person in this situation. You're the child, you're the most important person, you deserve the truth. And I thought that was very interesting because I'm just like, right now, the person we're seeing is not the 54, 53-year old person. You are talking to that child.
Right.
And so I was just like, you can, like, it's very interesting that, like, his father was that present already. Like, that was kind of interesting to me because I'm just like, for somebody who has never even thought that like this was a possibility,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you are so like um tapped in to kind of like what this situation is very interesting. And you can actually see like um when they after like the second test, when they were all in our room, I was just like, man, this is awkward as hell. Like I'm like, did they say anything to each other? Like, because I'm like, it has to be insane for for like you to see this person decades later, and that is crazy to me.
And even in that moment, like, when you really think about it, again, there's so much of it that we don't know and that is missing and the time that has lapsed. I mean,
hmm
it's not like the test, comes right back. Like you do have to wait for it. So, we only know what we saw and like what may have kind of played out from first test to second test, being that they really almost all look like, I don't know. I mean, they all are still in the same area, right?
Hmm.
So even with that, how often may they have seen each other prior, but never really, came to that kind of conclusion.
Hmm.
So it definitely um, really was a very interesting way that they kind of brought this story together. And it's been interesting just seeing the response, you know. Um,
So what did you so what did you think about Kirk's conversation with his son?
it was one, it was very interesting, and one, I thought that, I mean, I just, I see um Kirk in just, I think in in a light that I've never seen him before. I think that, as a father, right, you are literally going through the one of the worst possible things you could ever go through. And it's literally all about really you and you finding out who your father is. But you know how important it is for your son to know that he now has a grandfather, and be there for him when he is trying to deal with his emotions about it. And and just seeing the difference between the two's, just their stance. Like, even in that moment when this man is dealing with the fact that he just found out that his father is here or whatever, and he's being so calm and peaceful, and allowing his son to have the space to deal with his emotions and all of that. And and you see, like, Karen, like, he's just, he's moving and he's rocking, and he's already like, and then he hears the news, and he breaks down. And it's not like, well, dude, what you upset? It's like he just was just being there as a father. So I thought that was a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think it's very interesting um because I I mean, I don't know. It's very interesting because I'm just like, I wonder what was it like, what about the situation. Well, I can see, never mind. I was thinking about the idea that he did has like this mindset of like reconciliation between them as well. And I'm like, it also has to, because it's not like they didn't think, like he didn't think that he had a grandfather. He thought he had a grandfather, and dude was trash, and dude was dead. Like, so it's very interesting to me that um I don't know. It was a very interesting dynamic to me. Yeah, because I wondered how far along was Kirk in that journey, um, after like figuring out the situation to where he told his son,
Hmm.
because he was calm, like he was extremely calm, and I'm like, I don't know how this gonna go, because the way he was acting, I was like, he about to act up. He is about to act up. And I'm like, in the first time that you actually are having a conversation with your son, to tell him something like this is not small news. Like this is something. This is a big deal. And I found it interesting that like even when they're not in a good space, he still felt it necessary to tell him these things. You
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
And I kind of think that like because I think what is his Kieran,
Mhm.
he's the oldest. Wasn't
Mhm.
he like hurt coming from like the relationship before he even met Tammy?
Yes.
And so I find it very interesting that like I don't know, like y'all kind of did have to grow together. It kind of felt like they were growing up together in that moment because there's a part when Kirk was just like, I don't even know who I am well, you know? I don't know who I am
And that
well.
was
And that
crazy, you know, because like that idea, that concept, like when you have only ever dealt with
knowing your
trauma and dysfunction and have never felt whole, to come to a place where, you know, you realize like this is all I've ever known. So like I don't know what I look like, how I show up in the world, okay, you know, or whatever, you know. It's just like someone who deals with chronic pain, you know. You have been in pain for so long, you live with the pain, you learn to deal with the pain, you learn to do
manage it.
everyday activities, and then when the pain is gone and you wake up one day and you realize like, wait a minute, I don't even have to step out of the bed like this anymore because it don't hurt anymore there.
I think
Or
I
I
think a lot of
don't
times
have
what
to take this med anymore because I don't have this pain.
I think a lot of the times, one of the hardest parts I think just like of life a lot of the time is realizing that it doesn't always have to be trauma that develops who we are. And I think that like we see it that way sometimes. It's like our trauma because this happened, we've become this type of person, or we have this quality, or like it's like trauma is what moves us forward throughout life.
Hmm.
And I think when we see life that way, that like really we don't put those same qualities on like happy situations in our life. Like these are good things that happen to us.
But if you never really, I mean, like, you know, of course, some people will be like, oh, you know, he's rich, he's got this, he's
Mhm.
got that, da, 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 you know. It's not like, you know, he's still living with whatever, but, you know, some things you never come away from. You know, you carry it, whether no matter what your lifestyle is. You know, when you live with a certain level of even rejection or a certain level of, you know, feeling condemned, no matter what your lifestyle has brought you to, it will still be there in some, you know, shape or form. Or you constantly are living in fear that you're going to lose the things that make people look at you differently, that make people treat you differently, you know. So you have to always stay in this heightened state as well, trying
Yeah,
to make sure that you stay up, you know, so
yeah.
that you're not put in a position to be looked at as that, you know, sad little boy, or, you know, fast little girl, or whatever the case might be. You know, and so it's
It
just
makes
an
you hype.
interesting thing.
It makes you hyper vigilant. I
Hmm.
think would be a good way to say that. And a lot of people don't realize like what hyper vigilance does to your mental. Like when you are always in that state where you are constantly um trying to be like stay on top of like what's going on, that that does something to you. Not
Mm-hmm.
only is that something that like it messes you up mentally, but it does have other consequences. Like that affects you physically. Um and I was watching like Kev on stage, right? And he was talking about like what he would like in his mind, what he was thinking while he was watching. And he was just like, I what person like what kind of person would I be if like my biological father um, was in my life? Like I had a stepfather, and of course like I love my stepfather. I know that like him marrying my mom changed my life, but I always grew up aware that I still had like a biological father, and
Mm-hmm.
like it didn't like it doesn't matter even if you have that figure, that father figure, it's still not like you're still very aware that this man is still not your like biological father. You know what I'm saying? Like he wonders if like one of the reasons why when he feels rejected, his thing like his mechanism is I'm gonna do something, and everybody that did me wrong in this, I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna show them. And he was just like, bro, like I had a stepfather, and I still like when it comes to rejection, this is still something that I do just because of my relationship with my father. And I'm like, a lot of times I think sometimes I wonder what we like what are the things that our parents instill in us that like we are unconsciously um like the ways that they unconsciously show up for us, because by all what's the word? By all measurements or by all example, I should like there's certain things about me that might not make sense because I have a mother, I had a active mother, I had a father. I grew up in a household where my parents were together. So there are certain things that people assume just because you have these things, um, there's certain traumas that shouldn't exist in you just because this is the life that I'm like you supposed to be okay. You are supposed to be okay by all statistics or anything. I'm supposed to be okay because I grew up
But
with a
that's
working
making
mom.
the assumption that, you know, it's not just about two parents being in a household. It's
Hmm.
also about two whole people being in the household. And,
Let's
when
talk about this
anytime
all
you're
the time.
dealing with people who have, drama or trauma that they haven't dealt with, it shows up in adulthood in other ways, in the way that we raise, our children. My, you know, unchecked trauma caused me to raise you guys from a place of fear.
Mhm.
Fear that, um, you guys were going to go through anything of, any of the things I went through. Fear that y'all were going to feel the way that I felt in different circumstances. All this just unchecked craziness that, went on in my mind. Um, and that's just on my end. So, it's not just about having a mother and a father or, whatever. Like it's about having two loving parents in the household working together, to, make, productive, adults, eventually. And not to say that that was not our goal, but we were two people dealing with our own traumas. that had never been really truly dealt with, right? So it gets passed on some way,
It,
some form, you know.
it's very interesting because um, as I get older, I'm becoming more aware of the fact that like I, y'all might have like I know that y'all loved each other, but I also know that like a lot like it feels like that was like a trauma bond. Like I neither one of y'all were coming in this situation any like even knowing what wholeness felt like that was the furthest thing from y'all.
Right.
And it's very interesting because I'm just like now y'all are two people that have clearly like been through traumatic stuff, right? And you think that like what kind of people does that produce, you know?
Yeah. And I think that, you always hope that, that things will make you better and not bitter. You always hope that, God forbid, if you, have to go through something that is going to make you stronger in the end, you know, um, being raised in a, in a very traditional Christian household and, and going to church, actively going to church, you, there's this thing in our community where, it's almost like a badge of honor, um, when you go through things, it's like, because it's like you're going to start hearing like, that test is your testimony and that mess is your message. And, and God's going to get the glory out of it. And not to say that he won't, but it's like at some point you be like, well, Dad, God, could I have like, just maybe read the cliff notes and maybe not actually had to go through some stuff and like I could still be a decent human being
Hey
without having
man,
to go
that long
like,
suffering ain't no joke.
because
These are
it was
like
really, really crazy to me. I was watching, someone as well give their reaction to, the Kirk Franklin video, and it was like, that trauma that y'all saw is why we get what we get from Kirk. And it's like, I'm pretty sure this man would have rather not made not one record and not have gone through this, and I'm like, it's got to be a better way. It's really got
listen,
to be a
okay,
better way.
I say this
Like,
all the
people
time.
can be
So
creative, and like in any other fraction of the world, any other genre of music, somehow people are able to write songs well, sing well without being like completely crucified through their life for all to see. But
listen,
somehow we make these things, and like I said, I mean, we've seen examples throughout the Bible of how God has used, you know, different people and all that, and I know that he still does. He still uses the things that we've gone through, but I think that we always have to be careful because it's almost like sometimes it will make you think like, did he allow me to go through this, or did he allow this to happen just so I could go through this? And it puts you in a very weird space. And when you are someone who deals with um, daddy issues, if you will, it makes you look at God differently. Because when people are like, "Oh, God is a good father," and you have no reference to what that is,
listen,
you begin to find like, what does that mean? So
you
now
look
God becomes dad that kind of loves you, but as soon as you do something wrong, he going to scream on you and punish you, and whatever. And so I just
listen, here's the
that.
thing, because you're walking heavy. I'll
Okay.
say that. And this is the thing where I be like, we just we just just stuff. Because the thing that gets to me sometimes is like I don't think people will realize that a lot of the idea that like bro the suffering like I'm about to turn this test to a testimony, that'd be a coping mechanism. Like you have to like in your mind what you're doing is trying to rationalize something that harmed you or hurt you, and so that you could be okay, just so you can be okay, just so you can function.
Yeah,
Like you have to convince yourself that like what you just went through for some reason is for the greater good.
yeah,
And it's so interesting to me because one of the things that I have always like hated that people say is just like, oh, like we all got the same 24 hours. And I hate that statement because I'm just like, bro, life be dragging the hell out of some people more than most. Like, yes, we have the same 24 hours, but
yeah.
some
But
of us just be getting mollywopped in life.
yeah, you don't even want to know what that first hour can be like for some people. You know, the concept is good. It's a nice little motto, but it it is unfair and it's unrealistic. Because there are some people that are really, really battling and really, really doing their best, and when they are seeing no results and they hear like, oh, if you just put a little bit more, or if you just did whatever, like you have no idea like the mental strain that you could be putting on someone, because God knows there's a lot of, there I'm gonna speak about me. I know that there have been times that I have literally just cried because I could not see my way out of getting us into a better situation. And I was working as hard as I could. I was doing the best that I could. I was physically, mentally, emotionally tired, but I knew I had to keep going. I'm getting, battle over here, battle over here, battle over here. Y'all feel some type of way, and it's like, Jesus Christ, like when can, like, I just need a minute. I just need a minute. I need a minute to think. I need a break, and I always remind myself that it's very easy to be back in that position. We're all, most of us. There's some people that don't have to, but it doesn't um, take a whole lot for some people to be back in a position where they have to worry about living paycheck to paycheck, or that one paycheck, could get them on the street, or whatever the case might be. And I think sometimes that we we get so caught up in some stuff that we forget, you know, um, like what it really means to be human, what it really means to feel for somebody else. And I think what I loved, amongst many things about this documentary, was that in that moment, I think that we all, that were affected by it, just were human. And whether or not your situation was similar, or you've never been through nothing like that, and you knew both your parents and they loved each other and you got to watch them grow old or whatever, you still could find some empathy and
Mhm.
sympathy for this man and for these people, and for people that have been in their position, um, you know, period. And time is kind of getting away from us. Again, we are talking about the Kirk Franklin documentary called Father's Day. Beats per minute. We talk about hip hop. We talk about health issues, but we do talk about matters of the heart. And Aaron and myself thought that this was an extremely important conversation to have, because it is something that so many people have been affected by, and I am one of them.
Let's let you gonna talk or
I mean, so just being completely transparent, I grew up, my mom and dad were older. They had me at a late period in life. Um, I grew up knowing that, some of my brothers and sisters were not like by my father, if you will. They had other dads. But I grew up believing that, my dad was my dad. My grandmother told me when I was in elementary school, like probably fifth going into sixth grade, that there was the possibility that my dad wasn't. But my mom was like, no, that's not true, whatever, whatever. And I believed her, because my mom was always very honest about her life and the things she had went through. My mom suffered with bipolar, with psychosis. She had went through a lot of stuff, and and so when she said no, there wasn't a possibility, I put it on the brain cell, but I didn't think of it any further. Um, well, 2016, my niece, it might have been before 2016, but my niece got really heavy into ancestry and wanting to find, more information about my grandmother's family, my grandfather's family. And so she wanted, me and my remaining brother and sister and other members of the family to do a DNA test. So it was in 2017 during like Hurricane Irma, I think it was. We drove, to Georgia. And while I was there, she made me do my little DNA test. And the joke was from, the line from Color Purple, like, hey, what if I find out Pa is not Pa? And it was a joke. Well, the joke was a reality. I did find out that my dad was not my dad. In that moment, I had no idea who my dad was, but I for many reasons, I was just happy to find out that the person that I grew up believing was my dad was not. Um, because of things that was going on in my personal life up to that point, that was good enough for me. Things that had happened in my marriage, I wasn't willing to dig deeper because of the fear that what if my bio dad was happily married and had cheated on his wife, and here I am like, oh, you're my dad, and now I'm blowing up his marriage. What if, he is dead? What if he never had children and always wanted children, and now here I come, and then he loves the hell out of me, and then he dies. So I didn't try to, find out any more information, but my niece did. My niece was dead set on solving this mystery, and whatever. And in 2020, we had got pretty close to realizing who, my dad possibly could have been. It was out of him and his brother, since we wasn't really sure. And, found out that both of them had passed away. My soon to be uncle, if you will, had passed from COVID. And then I found out that, my dad, my bio dad, had passed away too. So, yeah, I can say that, like being 48 years old, watching that documentary completely broke me. I was never going to have that moment with my bio dad, him realizing that I was here. But I also saw myself in his mom, and being a 15-year-old girl who had a baby, and remembering how at 15 years old. My mom trying to be supportive of me, taking me to this place to get, assistance and help or whatever for when Ashley came. And them like literally every week badgering me about, you know, um, that I couldn't love my child if I was going to try to keep her, that the most loving thing I could have done was give her up for adoption. And just like literally, it was like I sat there every week during my pregnancy for an hour just being badgered and just um yeah and just having no idea what I was going to be able to do for this child. But I just knew that I didn't think that I would be able to live if I gave her up, and knowing she was just somewhere in the world, without me. And then coming to his dad and seeing his response. So for me, it really hit home. It was hard because I actually dealt with some emotions about my situation that I had not allowed myself to deal with. I called one of my new cousins, that we call each other sister cousins, and talked to her about it yesterday, and said that I had to be honest with myself about how I felt about some things. And the one thing she mentioned was, yeah, she realized like when, we first were at a space where I had a few, like her and someone else do a DNA test to see, which one might have been my dad. She was mentioning how nonchalant I was at the time, and I realized that I had no choice but to be. I was dealing with way too much at that time to really think about what was going on, and I think that I'm just getting to a place where I'm really actually able to think about what I just experienced, and just knowing both of my parents are gone. I can't ask neither one of them anything.
And when it came down to it, like I said, we've talked about it, and I've told you that um I don't think that like this is something that you've really been able to process the information. And I think in a lot of ways that just me knowing you, I've seen that like sometimes you do this thing where because you don't believe that you can emotionally handle something, you just don't allow yourself to process it. Because if you do, there's like this doubt that you'll be able to put yourself back together. Like you don't fully believe that you'll be able to put yourself back together if you just allow yourself to live in whatever that feeling is. And I think one of the things that is probably very hard is the fact that like your mom's not here. So not only are you dealing with something that she did, you have to deal with it by yourself essentially because she's no longer here. So if you are angry, if you are uh, feeling like slighted, if you're feeling disappointed, all those emotions have nowhere to go because that person is not here. So where do those feelings go?
Mhm.
They stay internal because not only do you feel messed up about being angry at somebody that's not here, you also have nowhere for those emotions to go. And so then I don't know. I think that it's just a very, very tough situation
Mhm.
because like I think that even with the best intentions, I don't like the fact that like it became a thing where you said you didn't want to know anything and you were still like somebody felt like they should do it anyway. Like is that kind of irritates me because it's just like now like this for you is just like you finding out something because to you just want to know, but you didn't want to know. So like while this might not hurt as bad or like be as heavy on my cousin, this is something that has completely rocked your life and you didn't want to know for a reason. And I don't know, like that kind of bothers me because I feel like in that aspect it's even more unfair to you.
I think that, like, to be honest and just transparent and fair to, to her, I didn't want to know because it was just one more thing that I didn't want to be disappointed by. I didn't want to have to deal with. And so um it was me being afraid. It was me being in fear. I had a lot of fears of what the end result was going to be. And like I said, being someone who was married and, husband coming home and saying, like, hey, gotta tell you something. I knew what that felt like. I knew what it felt like, having to come to you guys and saying, hey, we need to tell you something. I didn't want to be, on the other side of that for someone else because I didn't want to be rejected, right? Um, to find out that maybe there was someone who actually wanted me as just the daughter and now they weren't here. I didn't want to feel that kind of pain. So all of it was just fear. And so I have come to realize, like, I'm not going to put that on anybody else because once we did it, it was going to happen anyway. Um, the more and more people that, happens to do their DNA, the leaves on the trees start blooming, and eventually someone was going to find me, whether, we did anything else or not, honestly. So
I
I have to just say that, we are a little over the hour. I want to kind of just stop there with that and also just kind of, get to a place where we kind of wrap it up because I don't want it to become a thing about, the woulda, coulda, shouldas. Because at the end of the day, I have been blessed in that process of being able to meet, two really, really great people who are my cousins that, have loved on me and have accepted me. And, and right now, I'm okay with that. I do have to process a lot, but as I'm healing from other things, I'm able to process in it. And I think the only reason why I wanted to be able to have this discussion about the documentary and also be for the first time open and honest about where I'm at is just so that we could allow that platform for other people to, be able to have that type of discussion and be open and honest about how they feel about certain things. Like I said, whether or not you've gone through the same similar situation, um, we all found something that have watched it. We found something about it that affected us in some type of way or whatever. I hope that, we can continue the conversation, that, other people will feel free enough to share their thoughts, their stories, their testimonies, their whatever. Um, because I think that, we are at a place where we have to realize that we all need each other more and more. And, um, whether or not it's a really bad breakup that happened or you just didn't know or whatever, like kids need to feel loved, they need to feel wanted, they need to feel, to be nurtured, to have it from both parents when it's a healthy situation, right? And I just think that, this conversation can be brought into so many different conversations. And
That's
how can
why,
we heal our community by making sure that, we're able to allow, um, people to be parents and to know where they come from, because, we talk a lot about the idea of like, as Black people being brought over into this country and not knowing our roots. But most of us don't even know our roots that stem from since we've been here because of things like this. And we need to, have that. Like, you could be in the same city and not even know, that's your sister, half brother, your cousin, whatever, and a lot of people, I think, walk around feeling very alone in this world, not knowing that they have people that they could call their family. That's it.
yeah. Well, that's kind of why I came up with like the title, because uh, when I was looking at the track list for that album, uh, he has a song on there that was going to be called "It's Somebody's Son," and
Mm-hmm.
so I came up with like the Father's Day somebody's daughter, and I think my purpose for kind of like wanting to have this conversation in a lot of ways is just because I think sometimes um, we fail to realize that sometimes the people that we're interacting with or we come across, we don't even realize that like that's the child. Like we don't we're not we're interacting with like children in adult bodies because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we don't grow past when these traumas hurt us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like a lot of times it's just like yes, you are grown, but the person that I'm speaking to, the person that I am in relationship with, the person that I am in friendships with, I have to realize that a lot of times they're not showing up as that adult. Like I'm talking to that child,
Right.
and I think that's why like I really related to the fact to when he was saying that like I feel like I'm 10 years old again. Like this situation makes me feel like I'm 10 years old again. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, because you never like your growth stopped at that point. Like you grew up, but you never like grew past that 10-year-old. A lot of times we see life, we have kids, uh, we get great jobs. We think all of these things are what are supposed to make us like these perfect adults or things like that. But the, that's not who's showing up for us. That it's not how they show up in the way that we like you love somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Because if that's something that has never matured as you matured, like if you can't communicate, I can tell because you communicate like a 10-year-old. Like these are things, these are qualities where you can kind of tell that the person you're dealing with at some point their growth stopped. And that is where they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because
That's like,
that whole documentary, I did feel like I was seeing this man be like he was a child and his emotions. Um, I don't
well, I want
it,
to, I want you to clear that up because he wasn't being a child in his emotions. It was
No.
just the child in him was was what we saw dealing with his emotions of
Yes.
everything.
Uh-huh.
And I think that if we're being honest, we saw Kirk at different ages and
That's
different
true.
levels because you saw a very small child finding out that the person that he found out was his dad wasn't his dad. God only
Mm-hmm.
knows what that scenario and whole situation became because, mind you, it was only a very small amount of time from the time that he was supposedly told that this is your dad and you might want to come now because he only got a couple months to him actually passing away. Did Kirk then go all out and make sure that the person he thought was his father was buried properly? Whatever the case might be, did he then begin building relationships with people from that family? We don't know. But then you find out there's someone else and they're still here. What that felt like, seeing that person. And I'm just like, soon as the man came on screen, I'm like, oh my God.
This, all of the
And
ears,
I
just the naked,
know
you
what
just
that felt
know.
like because the first time that one of my cousins was like, oh my God, you look like your dad, I couldn't even like handle the idea because I knew that for me growing up, I never saw myself in anybody. The only thing that I saw in anybody was Dalphine had a gap like I had a gap. So growing up, I'm like, I'm never getting rid of my gap, especially after she passed away. Because this reminds me, when I see this, I see my sister. That's the only thing that I, had in common with someone, right? Excuse me. So I can't even imagine for him what it was like to look at this man and see yourself. Well, I can because I've seen it in real life, like with your dad. But it's very hard, right?
Girl, at this point, I don't can't relate because it's like five people that look like me. So this face at this point is just blown.
It's been recycled.
A
But
couple times.
anyway, I want to thank everybody that joined, in tonight. I'm very grateful and thankful that, you guys took the time to, uh, you know, jump on in, and listen in on the conversation. And I hope that you will all keep the conversation going in your own lives with your friends, your family, your children. I think that when we have these conversations and we talk about these things, this is what helps to prevent them from happening by being open, honest, and transparent, by making sure that, our kids even know that even, at a very young age, when they make mistakes, that you can still move past those mistakes. And we gotta, really help people to grow past that hurt little girl, that hurt little boy. And, I want to
Because
thank my lovely co-host for joining me.
hold
But go
on.
ahead, Taryn.
The last thing I wanted to say is when you were saying how like you hope that like people could grow up past what do you say?
That I hope that, we allow people to grow past the hurt little girl and hurt little boy.
One one of the things, and I'm just going to end with this. One of the things that I found super, it was like an aha kind of moment, is when I was in therapy. You talk about your childhood stuff, and one of the things that my therapist had to constantly kind of say to me was that I talk about those life like situations from the perspective of like a 25-year-old, 26-year-old person. instead of explaining it as the child that actually went through those things or the teenager that actually through those things. And when I say that, like, um, one of the things I'm learning is how to give myself grace when it does come to kind of respecting me in my healing process of trying to like heal my inner child, is to actually allow myself to see those moments for the age that I actually was, and not me seeing myself through the lens of somebody that should have known better, or um, who I am now. And I hope that maybe some people give themselves more grace, just because sometimes we do see like the mistakes we made from the lens of somebody that is like older and knows better, when we all just trying to figure this stuff out. Like, we all just trying to get past our own, like, get past ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, I
That's me.
definitely agree. I agree. All right, y'all. So, um, you know, join in next week. We actually are probably got a couple more episodes before we take a little break or whatever. We're gonna try to go ahead and give this season, bring this season to an end, so we can get ready for next season and bring bigger and better and more engaging episodes. Our hope is to really begin, to just provide some really great conversations and interviews and information that's going to help people. Um, so we thank you all for joining in. We thank everyone for their support. Please tell a friend, tell your family, tell people, hey, y'all need to come over here. They're having real conversations over here. um,
Kind of does,
'cause
bro.
you know what I'm saying, anyway, I ain't got it tonight. Um, but thank you guys again for joining, and make sure to like and subscribe to our social media channels at beatsperminute.pod. Again, we're on YouTube at Beats Per Minute Podcast. You can catch the audio version of the podcast every weekend on Apple Music and Spotify. And just keep keep the conversation going. That's all I have to say. All right. Have a great night, y'all.